Welcome back to the Wellbeing in Practice podcast, bringing you the latest in complementary, integrative, and functional medicine conversations. I'm Tanya Borowski, Head of Education here at Amrita, and your host. Today, I have with me a highly esteemed colleague, Helen Edwards, who is also a nutritional therapist like myself. And she is a consultant for New Roots Herbal. And one of the key reasons that I wanted to get Helen on the podcast, one, because she's such a beautiful human being, but two, because she has a real passion for gut health, cleansing, and detoxification. And in fact, that's in some way what led her to New Roots. And she has a very specialist interest in working with practitioners and her own clients in resolving digestive associated conditions, inflammation, weight gain. And we are going to be really zoning in today, talking about parasites and parasite cleanses. Welcome to the podcast, Helen.
Thank you so much for the lovely intro.
You're
I appreciate that.
welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome. So I've kind of given a little bit of a precursor, but Helen, you're a nutritional therapist. And how long actually have you been a nutritional therapist for?
For about 9 years. I qualified with ION 9 years ago. Yeah, but my interest in nutrition really stemmed about 13 years ago when I embarked on a retreat in Fiji, and it was a health retreat. We ended up doing reluctantly doing about 8 days of colonics.
Oh,
Um, yeah, fasting, wheatgrass shots, a really combination of different therapies in there. And I felt honestly after finishing that retreat that my health, I felt like I was reborn. My energy was amazing, my focus, my concentration, and honestly, I've never felt so strong in my body too. Even to the point where just after the retreat, I was meant to be training for a marathon. I had an ITB injury, so I didn't do very much training. I think the most I put on my legs was about 11 miles, and it was my fourth marathon. And in the end, I just went, okay, I'm just going to run, because I was running for a charity at the time, and I ended up getting my best time. And I honestly put it down.
wow.
I know, but I know exactly. So I do honestly put that down to cleansing. When I was seeing what was coming out of me in the colonics was huge. I had so many what I looked like parasites come out of me, fungus, other things. But growing up, I never had any digestive issues. I played sport competitively, but and maybe I didn't feel quite strong enough in my body. I would say I had a little bit more brain fog
Okay.
and tiredness, but other than that, relatively quite good. So that's really transformed me to gain interest in nutrition. And one of the reasons why I met New Roots is because I was helping a client with parasite issues. I kind of delve into their area more of gut health. I naturally attract more clients in gut health than parasites, candida, any kind of bacterial overgrowth.
Okay.
But parasites was a big area for me because I was trying to find a formula 5 years ago that had everything in there, that I'd researched as really good ingredients to have to help kill off parasites, expel them from the body,
Mm-hmm.
support the body properly. And that's when I saw New Roots. And I was like kind of, quite excited that I came about, that they were in the UK, and I found them on the Nutrition Network. And that's when I engaged with them and then ended up being a consultant with them.
Incredible, incredible. And what I love is that this is really sort of integrative and functional medicine has the sort of, if you like, the newer buzzwords, but actually the sort of this really is going back to the roots of this type of medicine, of the sort of naturopathic principles, and using sort of cleansing as within that. So how do you sort of firstly how do you firstly prepare a client for doing a cleanse, and do you expect there to be a reaction? How do you prepare your client for that?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things is optimizing those elimination channels.
Okay.
So we're looking at supporting the liver, make it, because often there's congestion. There may be congestion from a bile perspective, which
Yes.
obviously helps to emulsify fats and take away toxins. The liver's often overworked because of the exposure to antibiotics and all the other things that we're exposed to on a daily basis. You know, sometimes people can have quite a sluggish bowel movements. So it's really supporting those key elimination channels first and foremost, because if you start killing off parasites, they're going to be releasing bacteria, heavy metals, and other toxins and waste products, thereby, you know, byproducts. And that's when there's an autotoxification risk. And that's when, you know, potentially you could end up having, you know, Herxheimer reaction, you know, where there's fever and chills and flu-like symptoms that could come about, is what you want to avoid. So doing that pre-work to prepare the body to help eliminate those toxins,
Of course, that makes
optimizing them.
sense.
Yeah, that's where, you know, obviously when you're breaking down parasites, you're going to have some level of fatigue as they die off and they're moved out of the body. You may have some headaches, you know, as they're being killed off. But what you really want to avoid those big reactions. So that's why
Yes.
you need to prepare first. So in terms of the way, in terms of breaking down parasites, though, first and foremost, or preparing the body, I think one of the things that I think is really important, particularly if it's been either a long-standing infection or infection that you've had for a certain period of time, is looking at using a biofilm disruptor, because parasites, bacteria form like a matrix, a protective matrix that protects them. They share nutrients, they grow, and that's when it's very, very hard if you start throwing antibacterial or antimicrobial stuff, or antifungal, antiparasitic stuff at things that have been in the body and resided in the body for quite some time. You know, it's hard to break them down and get the result that you want. So in those early stages, that's when I look at cleansing the elimination channels and using a biofilm disruptor. So things that I would like as a biofilm disruptor that I tend to use would be NAC, the N-acetylcysteine. You do want 600 milligrams per capsule, and I'd use that 3 times daily. And that's going to obviously help. It's going to support the liver and is a precursor to glutathione, so it's going to be helpful in that way. But it's also going to be breaking down those biofilms. And children can use that. There is studies. I've looked at just a recent study for children with the Nutritional Medicine Journal, and it's also safe to take. I would, even at higher dosages, but I'd still be cautious and do maybe 300 milligrams 3 times daily with children from maybe, 7, 8 onwards. But it doesn't seem to be any issues there with that. With wild oregano, you could use as well at 5 drops, or 3 to 5 drops 5 times daily with adults. And I'd probably use that for a week versus the NAC that I would use probably for maybe 4 to 6 weeks.
So, and this would all be, so the wild oregano is also a biofilm disruptor.
It is, yeah. You want to really aim for one that's got the highest carbachol content in it. So again, the Nutrix one has I think 95 to 97% carbachol, and that's where it will be really helpful in breaking down those biofilms and allowing them to be released.
That makes sense. At the same time, you've said optimizing or ensuring all of their elimination channels are optimal. Is that, if I got that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the most important things to do though is to, again, look at the person's diet, making sure they haven't got any food sensitivity. So doing all that dietary stuff first is really important, because that's, some of those symptoms when you start cutting out caffeine or you start cutting out gluten or dairy, you're going to get some of those fatigue aspects or, inflammatory cascade of issues that can often occur when you're cutting out stuff for the first time. So preparing the body as much as possible, supporting digestion if required, if there's intolerances there, and, potentially if you have done a gut test, or even if whilst you're getting tested, doing all that pre-work with them first. So supporting their digestion with, those lovely bitter herbs, making sure you're integrating, apple cider vinegar if required, if they're telling you there's some symptoms around that, we're breaking down protein or, potentially signs of low stomach acid. I would also look at optimizing sleep and stress as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously a mindful eating, hydration is so super important, particularly when you start using some of the formulas as well, because you want things moving out. And, you know, if you're using binders and fiber, you want to make sure you're drinking optimally as well. And then I would also encourage physical activity and sweating, because skin is one of the main detoxification channels.
Of
You know, if
course.
we,
Yeah.
yeah, and, you know, sweating, whether it be sauna, but, you know, the studies are really suggesting sweating physically, intensive, high intensity training sometimes can be very beneficial, whether it's short bouts of it, just to get that lymphatic system working properly. And obviously showering after sweating quite vigorously, because, you know, you don't want to reabsorb some of those toxins. So doing things like that, preparing the body first, preparing it from a dietary and lifestyle perspective, could be really beneficial. And then you can either, you know, move on to the first phase where you're breaking down that biofilm,
Yeah.
but also using a cleansing product,
Okay.
which I can.
We'll go into that in just one sec, but I would imagine that, I'm sure that, so this is sort of I use this term all the time, and it's very ironic. This is our bread and butter, is that, and we experience this all the time, that actually this prep work, I'm sure that a lot of symptoms, just by, or not just, but by partnering with clients, to get them on board and understanding the importance of these diet and lifestyle patterns that you're asking them really to commit to. This is a big change. This isn't the way that we work. This isn't a diet that you pick off the shelf and we want you to follow for 6 weeks. We're sort of partnering with these clients to help to educate them to see how much better you'll feel by living in this way, right? And I'm sure,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, it's just getting things to work better. You know, it's not about necessarily, and this is the thing with, you know, bacteria and parasites. You know, as we know, that they coexist. You know, there's a
Yes.
parasitome, you know, and a microbiome, and they coexist. And it's not always healthy to necessarily go, oh, you know, I have to do a full-on parasite cleanse every 6 months. It's
No.
not necessarily key. You know, if you're presenting with enough symptoms, then yeah, absolutely. But otherwise, you know, I would be looking at optimizing your elimination channels and getting the body to do what it's meant to do in supporting the immune system and helping expel things naturally. And you're going to find that there's certain things that you can do that will, you know, some of these natural plants will actually help to move things out, the natural diuretics. So you're going to, and help to bind things out anyway. And if you're doing that once a year, just to optimize the function of your elimination channels, that sometimes is enough.
Yeah.
And often, you know, when I work with clients, I don't always go on to that second phase because I've achieved what I've needed to with the first. They're not willing to test and they're feeling much better. So I'm not going to be throwing stuff at it that's not necessarily required.
Okay, so leads me beautifully into my question around, you've brought up two things there that I'd like to dig into. So we've done the preparation. You've taken a really great case history. And the first thing is, what are some of the headline signs and symptoms that would alert you, Helen, to, I think there's an overburden of parasites, because like you said, we have this symbiotic relationship. But what classic symptoms that you think, okay, I think that parasitology is playing a part here. And then the next leading in part of that question is, do you always test? So two kind of questions there.
Yeah. So some of the key signs and symptoms, I would say, sometimes it's that kind of pale face, potentially anemia that they're presenting with, because parasites and bacteria feed on iron and get stronger.
Mm-hmm.
So potentially they could be, iron deficient. So particularly if they're hungry all the time, particularly around the full moon. The full moon makes parasites more active. They feed,
Wow.
reproduce more. Yeah, we produce more serotonin and less melatonin during a full moon. So parasites are more active, they migrate, they feed during those times. And that's really when you're wanting to use the anti-parasitic herbs during the full moon. And that's when
Love
you
that.
can also not necessarily have to, if you know that you've got full-blown infection, then go out and do the full course of anti-parasite treatment. However, if you're just suspecting, you could just phase some of these anti-parasitic ingredients around the full moon, 3 days before, during the full moon, and 3 days after, and then repeat on the next full moon. So you're not going too harsh in, but you're doing all that prep work, because again, that's the key, is optimizing everything first and foremost. So symptoms.
I love
So
that.
other
Yeah.
symptoms will be picking up some of those signs around the full moon, including like the itchy rectum, which may be there. Particularly children may complain of itchiness even around the vagina as well, because sometimes pinworms can aggravate the urethra and cause bedwetting.
Yes.
So that's kind of another sign. And obviously GI symptoms, the obvious GI symptoms of bloating, feeling diarrhea, constipation, some of the obvious things.
Is there more of a tendency to diarrhea than constipation or not?
I think both.
It's both.
I think,
Okay. Yep.
yeah, I think potentially, yes, if you've got a full-blown parasite infection, often diarrhea is more present. But again, it depends on that individual as well.
Okay.
But
Yep.
yeah, I'd say diarrhea. And again, just emotional well-being. Because, again, during the full moon, you might feel that we're feeling more emotional. But even in children, having that where they can't explain why they're feeling so emotional and upset, and they're just crying for no reason, that could be a key indicator. So, I mean, when we take clients on this journey anyway, they're going to go through some kind of a level of emotional detox. So also preparing yourself and them for that,
Okay, well,
as
that's a
though,
very valid point. So embarking on something like this is not, I mean, obviously the prep work that's going to be beneficial for everybody. But when we move into the first stage of the cleanse, that is maybe it's about meeting your client of where they're at, really. So like, for example, if they're going
yeah.
through a divorce or something, or they're just, then that isn't maybe quite the right time to be starting that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think being aware, you can obviously, they're going to feel better for optimizing some of those elimination channels.
Yes.
Whether you use a biofilm disruptor with them straight away is another thing. It's finding out where they are on the journey, what they want, what they're capable of achieving right now. I do often find, I always look at people when they come into me, and look at how well they're functioning overall, and those key elimination channels, because I do think you can make massive headway with people if you start just doing basics.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you can decide when it's right for them. Yeah. Preparing them from an emotional standpoint that they may feel like this
Yeah.
is good.
Okay. And so then leading on to that, so do you always run a stool test? I mean, I presume do you always test? And when you test, what you run a stool test, but you've just mentioned anemia. So looking at a comprehensive, like a CBC, for example, and looking for signs of anemia could be also really
Absolutely.
helpful, right?
Yeah, and then obviously the raised neutrophils,
Yep.
xenophils are all there that help to fight off. Basophils are all stimulated when there's an infection, whether it be bacteria or parasites. So that's a key sign. But also with the gut test, sometimes they're not going to show up,
No.
unless you do some kind of provocative, you're helping them move out, helping to
Yes,
break
of
them. Because again,
course.
the biofilms,
Yeah, they're going to hide.
so yeah, they're going to hide. So don't necessarily expect, if you suspect a parasite infection and it doesn't show up in the stool test, you still need to look at, going with those body whispers. If you do that optimizing the elimination channels, you can't really go wrong. And then if you still feel like there's something there, whether it be fungus related or parasitic related, or sometimes rebalancing that microbiome is absolutely essential. So getting a good picture of the GI, a test that allows you to look at the microbiome, allows you to look at digestive markers and residues, I say it's still very important, because
Okay.
then you can hone in and support them in the right way.
Do you have a favored, it's the question that every practitioner asks. Do you have a favored stool test? Or if you feel that you don't want to answer that, that's also completely fine. But
No, I've tended to gear towards the health path ones, because they're
yep,
very they use whether they use the Biovis
yes.
testing
Okay.
laboratory,
And you like them.
and I like the microbiome element of it. I think that's really good, very good in terms of what they show in terms of a picture.
Brilliant. Thank you. That's great. Okay, so now the next question, every practitioner is on the edge of their seat. Let's talk about,
I know.
okay, so we've got the results, and we've got confirm, and we've done the prep work. So what's the next stage that you guide your clients through?
Yeah, so obviously I would look at using that biofilm disruptor
Yep.
at the same time as supporting the doing literally an intestinal cleanse. So I would, in terms of an intestinal cleanse, I do, maybe I'm biased, but I'm very passionate, and it's the one I would use every year. It's the ultra purifant, just because it's got lovely drawing cleansing agents in there, along with psyllium and bentonite, as well as some gentle antifungal, antimicrobial, antiparasitic ingredients. So that formula alone can be enough for some people if they're presenting with lots of GI issues. So I found that I've never had to sometimes move on to that second phase. So the ultra purifant's got things like the psyllium, it's going to sweep the intestine clean. The bentonite's going to pull in. It had a negative charge to it, so it's going to pull in positive, anything that has a positive ionic charge, like bacteria and parasites, and it's going to help it take away with the psyllium. But it's also got natural plant diuretics, like it's got things like plantain and butternut that
Oh,
again
lovely.
help detoxify the body. It's got blessed thistle that helps with circulation, stimulates bile. It's got red clover, it's known to have blood purifying properties to it. It's got corn silk, again, that supports the
Oh,
kidneys,
love
natural
corn silk.
diuretic.
Yeah.
And then it's got like things like echinacea, again, really supportive for the immune system. But also some gentle, like it's got black walnut, which has antifungal, antiparasitic properties to it. Grapefruit seed, again, multiple levels of fungal, parasitic, bacterial. Garlic, and it's also got clove and caprylic acid, I think, in there as
God, it's
well.
a
So
wonder formula. It's a
it is,
wonder
but
product.
yeah, but it's not too harsh. What I
No.
like, it's very gentle, those antimicrobials. It's got more of the cleansing agents in there that are really going to help move things out. But in terms of age of use, I wouldn't be prescribing this to children. I would do it from
No.
14 plus.
Okay, thank you.
And I would also consider, again, where they're at, because as much as you want to follow supplementary guidelines in terms of amounts, sometimes you have to go slowly.
Yep.
So the newest one, they recommend 3 capsules twice daily. I think I've only had one encounter where that hasn't worked. But when there's someone who hasn't done that pre-work, they haven't come to see me, it's a practitioner who said, oh, I'm using it for my husband, but they haven't done that pre-work, and they're constipated. That's the time when I wouldn't be, and they're not drinking, they're not hydrating enough, they're not doing all that, improve their diet, then potentially are going to cause some issues with feeling a bit more constipated and stagnated first. So
And
I
you
would
would
absolutely,
generally, you would do that. Sorry, you would do that for, I mean, of course, it really, each client is different, but if
I
you
would use
could,
the whole bottle.
okay,
So yeah,
great.
so just go by using the whole bottle. So if you want to go to 2 caps twice daily, and then work your way to 3 caps twice daily, and it does say the optimal dose daily is 5 capsules twice daily. And even those patients, those clients that I've found that I would be acting more cautiously with, and tend to be on more that kind of sluggish bowel side, they've been actually moved themselves to 5 twice daily with no issues. So it's
Interesting.
doing that pre-work, and drinking, hydrating is really, really important.
And then just to clarify, the biofilm sort of as a safety net sits under that the whole time that you're on that bottle, or not? The
No,
biofilm
so
buster, sorry.
yeah, so you're using that biofilm disruptor, depending on how I would gauge it. If you're using wild oregano, I'd be cautious of using it much longer than 10 days.
Yep.
Because I think it's so strong. Um, for an NaC, I would be using it throughout that period while sure,
Got
and
it.
maybe even a little bit longer if required. But normally, you know, for that 4 weeks whilst you're using the ultra purified would be ideal at 3 times daily, just 1 capsule.
Wonderful. And do you find that most, if they've sort of, yeah, you're always going to have people who just want to launch in and do it. But when you've stepped through this process, people can sort of function, they can go to work, they can function, do their daily, they can do that. They might want to just, I would imagine they just gravitate to want to actually be a little bit more introverted, get to bed early, just because you're feeling that
Yeah,
you're looking after
yeah,
yourself and that you're
exactly.
eliminating what needs to be eliminated, right?
Yeah, and I think because it's a fiber formula as well, you're not necessarily going to be as ravenous as you would normally be. You know, it's so quite,
Yes.
it does prevent you to feel like you want to snack more, and it's quite, you know, it just have that kind of properties to it. So it's very helpful for those who wanted to lose weight too, I suppose. Um, yeah, I mean, there is another formula, an alternative formula, which I also use called Psyllium Plus. And I actually
Okay.
have that in my cupboard and tend to dip into it when I want it, you know, if I'm doing a short cleanse or just using it as a prebiotic fiber. But that's really nice because it's got things like clove in there. It's got hibiscus. It's got some really nice anti-inflammatory properties to it, and it can be dosed accordingly because it's powder. So it can be
Nice.
nicely integrated into smoothies. Again, normally you've got to be cautious because of hibiscus is in there, and there's not a lot of studies around it for children. So I've tended to kind of, with my children, you know, who are 12 and 8, have used it, you know, just like a quarter of a teaspoon in smoothies and stuff.
Well,
You know,
you're
when I've
just on
wanted
the
to.
cusp of being able to do that. Give it another year with the
Yeah,
12-year-old.
I know
And
it's
then,
true, isn't it? They go through the
yeah.
basic, but thankfully, he is actually one that listens to his body whispers all the time. He's always kind of very intuitive. He's the one who'll say, "Mom, I've had too much sugar this summer. You know,
Mm,
I'm actually from September. We're not going to have any sugar. You know, and then we're not talking sweets. We're just talking probably more ice creams or,
bless
you
him.
know, biscuits that they've made. So yeah, it's not necessarily an overload of things that sometimes are in the diet of children."
Amazing. Amazing. Okay, so that's but it's just so helpful. And then you sort of mentioned that sometimes you might need to move on to a second phase. What does that look like?
So in that, sorry, I should have said, in that first phase, you're looking at using a bowel cleanser, and you're also looking at supporting the liver and the microbiome. So the liver formula, the New Roots liver formula is brilliant because it's like a 3-in-1 formula.
Okay,
It's
go
got
on.
digestive bitters in it. So it's got things like artichoke, beetroot, radish, milk thistle, turmeric. They're all going to be very
Oh,
supportive from a
incredible.
bitter perspective to help digestion. Then but it's also the benefit being it's going to help that have a regenerating effect on the liver, but it's also going to support bile flow and bile production. And some of those ingredients really help release contained bile that's sat in the gallbladder. So any stagnant bile. So bile obviously is super important, removing toxins and making things move, you know, move out of the body. And then the fiber is really important too to help that kind of final toxin removal. But you know, it's got things like alpha lipoic acid in there as well that, you know, gently chelates heavy metals, and supports the liver. And also Schisandra, which is a lovely
Yeah.
adaptogenic herb that again supports the body. And then I would also use a probiotic that's got Saccharomyces boulardii, but a multi-strain probiotic. I think it's so important. A lot of practitioners kind of fall into just using Saccharomyces because there is great results from just using Saccharomyces. However, why we've got an infection in the first place is because we've got an imbalanced microbiome
Yep.
often as one of the reasons. So, and also there's other strains that inhibit parasites and other types of bacteria and candida, not just Saccharomyces boulardii. So things like Brevi and Rhamnosus. And there's also other ones as well, like Helvecticus, I think, and KC. They all work on that inhibitory effect, but also protecting that gut mucosa as well as supporting the immune system. So I know the New Roots one has like 10 billion Saccharomyces boulardii per capsule, along with these other important strains. So really helpful if you're going traveling, or if you want to, I would actually use it throughout the whole protocol when you're killing off parasites or fungus. as well as during as well, the first phase.
Okay, so there's essentially probably there's three products. Okay, that's reasonable. That's fantastic. Yeah. Okay. And then there isn't necessarily, depends on how people feel, but you intimated that there might be a second phase. Did I get that right?
Yeah, so this, exactly, absolutely, yeah. So if we kind of know there's enough symptoms that are present, and even after they've gone through that first cleanse, they want to continue on because we're very intuitive people. We know ourselves, whether there's something there, and so I would say getting them to look at their stool as well when they go, they're going to the toilet, just checking things there from that aspect. It's a very simple thing to do, but often not done. You could also get them to incorporate coffee enemas. I think coffee enemas are a game changer. I looked at using coffee enemas a couple of years ago for the first time after doing all these colonics 13 years ago. Honestly, again, transformational when it comes to moving things out and things that they will see in their stool. So again, it's not for everyone. They can use herbal enemas as well, and do them, maybe even do them prior to going to sleep, and do something very gentle, like chamomile.
Okay.
So yeah, things like that, just getting things to move out as much as possible. But then that second phase, I would be using for parasites specifically, I'd be looking at ingredients like wormwood and black walnut.
Yes.
They're really key ones because they help kill off quite a vast amount of different parasites. There are, hundreds of different parasites in the body that, potentially infect humans. There's about 70 protozoa, I believe. But still, we want to be using a number of different ones that will kill off, but also ones that will help expel it, like quassia is a herbal plant that helps expel parasites from the body. Clove also is very good because it helps to resolve any kind of digestive issues, but also helps to kill off the eggs, as well as, gently on a parasite level. Grapefruit seed is a really important one as well. It has the antifungal, antiparasitic ingredients to it. And antibacterial. So I always use, one of the things that I didn't mention is making sure the hygiene is in the house with regards to washing vegetables, washing fruits, veg. I use grapefruit seed extract. I have it in my cupboard and use it with the vinegar, and that's enough to help kind of remove any kind of eggs that may reside. So yeah, they're the things. I mean, the Nuits do a parasite called Parasite. And you're looking at an adult dose of 3 capsules, 2 capsules 3 times daily. But what I was going to say, ideally, what you want to be doing is phasing around that full moon. So finishing that cleanse if you can, if you know that they're going to go on a lower dose, trying to gear it. So whether it be 10 days out from a full moon, or 5 days out from a full moon, or 7 days. So you're doing at least 3 or 4 days prior to the full moon, during the full moon, and after the full moon is ideal, where you're using that parasite formula, because you're looking at about a 15-day period of using that parasite formula. And because of the life cycle of the eggs, you're repeating that formula for another 15 days. But again, if you're finding it's too much and some of those kind of very strong symptoms are coming on, you can, tailor it back a little bit and do a lower dose, but continue on is the most important thing.
But I would imagine that everything that you have done, that you've implemented before, really, I would imagine that the Herx reaction or the die-off it mitigates that by sort of all of that prep work, I would imagine.
It should, but there's obviously some people who've had long-standing infections for many years, and even with stress is driving it. Sometimes you can do a lot of work with them on that level, but still, their nervous system is still wired. So sometimes there may be more congestion, and they may get more things. So that's when you can actually integrate on that second phase some things like the metal detox protector that's got glutathione in, it's got alpha lipoic acid, it's got vitamin C, it's got NAC. It's going to help again move those toxins out and protect the cells. Or you could continue using liver formula, because that's going to be really helpful from a digestive liver, gallbladder perspective.
That is a really lovely all-round liver bile support. It's beautiful. Yeah, lovely.
Yeah. So for children, though, I wouldn't use this unless they're over 25 kilograms. Sorry, I was interrupting you.
No. Definitely. No, it's really important. So for children,
at least 7 or 8, 25 kilograms of body weight. And then I would use half dose. And then what I would do is use 1 to 2, depending on their age, capsules twice daily for 2 weeks, take a 2-week break, and then repeat again for 2 weeks. And again, you could coincide that a little bit with the full moon. And then improving their diet, obviously some of those, just making sure they've got more fiber in their diet. They're cutting out the sugar, which feeds parasites. Doing a bit of that pre-work with them on a gentle level, and supporting the microbiome with something like the Probiotic Plus.
Yeah. Or the psyllium fiber in a smoothie, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Yeah.
I think we've covered an awful lot of ground, and you've been incredibly generous with sharing sort of how to step through a client. You've taken a lot of the fit, certainly for me, a lot of the maybe the fear factor out of it, which I think there is, especially when you use the term cleanse or detox there, it can create quite a lot of fear. But really sort of the way that you've guided us through and how it mirrors circadian rhythms and actually and how you mirror the vibrations of the earth as well, if that doesn't sound too out there. But it really does come across that the in-depth thought, I guess, the thinking that has gone through these formulas, they've been put together and curated in a very mindful, of course, and in a very mindful way. And I think that really shows.
Yeah, and I think the protocol that I'm talking about really stems from our naturopathic doctors and herbalists. They're the ones who are very much behind doing this type of approach, because it's just much more thorough. It works versus if someone's had a long-standing candida infection, again trying to kill off candida with the candida sample, which is brilliant, can actually cause more problems straight away, or you could end up getting repeating infection. So I just think doing a lot of that optimization work is key.
It is.
Yeah.
Helen, you've been an absolute treasure. It's been such a delight to have you on the podcast, and for you to sort of give us a little peek behind the door of your clinic. And I know you help so many practitioners through your helpline as well. And here at Amrita, we're just absolutely thrilled to be working with you, but also, of course, the community of New Roots, and look forward to sort of collaborating more. Thank you so much for coming on and giving, as I say, a peek behind your clinic door. You've been incredibly generous. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Tanya. I appreciate you having me.
The views expressed in this podcast are that of the individual and not intended to be a substitute for professional advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice for any medical condition they may have, and should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions. While we make every effort to ensure that the information we are sharing is accurate, we welcome any comments, suggestions, or correction of errors.